how much you all enjoyed the lemon tart we did last weekend over Easter. I thought I'd do a savoury tart with you today. This is an absolute classic, Leeds School of Food and Wine recipe, so thank you for this one. It actually features in our professional chef course that we teach at sixth form at Truro School. We're going to start with a pastry. It's a slightly less rich pastry than we did for the lemon tart. Basically, we've got 250 grams of flour and 125 grams of butter. You could use hard marge, like a block marge, or you could actually do half block marge and half a lard or a white Trex for a really much more savoury pastry. This is a really rich tart. We've got leeks, we've got 350 double cream, we've got 3 eggs, we've got 100 grams of Gruyere cheese and some butter. So it is rich, but it's absolutely worth it. And it's a little bit of a sad day today because it's raining.
I know.
I mean, lockdown is one thing. Lockdown in the rain,
which we haven't experienced yet. We have been really lucky, so hopefully it doesn't last for too long.
I think the sun's coming out next weekend.
Well, next week, like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
I want the sun to come out because I want to do some outdoor cooking. Because I think you're fed up of this.
Who do you think you are?
I don't
you
know.
know, like on those chef shows
like
where
that.
they do like outdoor cooking. I just think it's ridiculous. No one else has a hob outside.
On tour into the garden. We've got a nice barbecue. Anyway, remembering actually something I've missed here, a bit of salt. Always put a bit of salt in your pastry. About a teaspoon. And I'm just cutting my fat into small pieces. Try and start with the fat as cold as possible, ideally out the fridge, and just cut it into 1 centimetre squares. What we're going to do now is rub in using the very tips of our fingers. Please don't use the palms of your hands because they're too hot. And just grab a bit of flour and butter and effectively massage the tips of your fingers, squidging that butter into the flour. And you want to keep doing this until the mixture gets to look like breadcrumbs. So we've got a nice breadcrumby mixture now, and using just a table knife, I want to mix in some water. Now, my advice when making pastries, don't try and measure it. You've just got to pop it in a little bit at a time and keep stirring until the mixture begins to clump together and there are no sort of dry patches. So, you should be able to sort of clump it together with just 2 or 3 pulls of your hand. Pretty much wipe the bowl clean. And if it's feeling a bit sort of soft at this point, so quite warm, then just make it into a disc shape and chill it in the fridge for about half an hour. This is still pretty firm and quite easy to handle. So we are going to roll it to fit our tin. Now you want a loose bottom tin, about 22 to 24 centimetres. Ideally, a savoury flan would have a non-fluted edge. I don't have that. And what we do is take our rolling pin, and if you watch the lemon tart, remembering how we rolled the pastry out, you're not going to roll. You are going to, what we call, ridge the pastry, and that stops it stretching. Because if you stretch the pastry, when it gets into the oven, it's going to shrink, and then you're going to lose that depth to actually put the filling in. Because a bit like the lemon tart, we're going to bake this pastry blind, which means we're going to cook the pastry before we put the filling in. Because if you're putting a runny filling in, like a sort of quiche mixture or a custard tart mixture, you need that pastry to be cooked first of all. So keep at it. When you get almost the size you want, you can do a few rolls, but try and limit this just to 2 or 3. There we go. And we want it to be big enough to be able to go up the sides as well as straight into the tin. So just move it around this way. Always important to move your pastry, mainly because you know that it hasn't stuck to the worktop. Then rolling pin in the middle, pull the pastry back towards you, pop your flan tin in front, and you want to just lay it over the top. And again, remembering what I said before with the lemon tart, you want to push the pastry down. Do not, under any circumstances, stretch that pastry, because stretchy pastry will shrink. So just get it more or less down into the corners as your first step. And then if you take off a bit that's obviously going to be excess, roll it into a ball, and then just, a bit of flour to stop it sticking, push it right down into those corners. So you want to get as much of a right angle in the corner of that tin as you possibly can. And then when it's really nicely in the corners, fold back any excess, and using your rolling pin, just cut it off, which is really quite satisfying.
Yeah, it looks very nice.
There we go. You can use those to make a few jam tarts or something for the children. And then I just sort of pop up again that edge of pastry. So if there is a little bit of shrinkage, you've got a little bit of room to play with. Now I'm going to pop that in the fridge. It is important to chill it at this stage. There we go. And before I chill it, I'm just going to put some pricks in the bottom with a fork. So if there are any little air bubbles when it hits the oven, they shouldn't rise up. So about half an hour in the fridge now to chill it. So we want to cook the leeks now. I've got some trimmed leeks. They're looking a little bit sad, but they'll be absolutely fine. We want to take the root off, just trim them up and take that outside layer off. Now for this recipe we want as pale a leek as possible, so really just the pale green part. And we need to give them a slice and then a really, really good wash, because leeks got a tendency like that to hide soil in the layers, and that can make you really quite poorly. It's actually one of the main causes of food poisoning, soil. So just take those outside layers off. I'm just going to get my colander. Very old colander.
I was thinking that yesterday. It's quite old.
It's definitely older than both you and Imogen. Okay, so I'm going to cut them in half, turn them over onto their flat side, and then I just want to cut them into some really, really fine slices. Got some really finely chopped leeks, actually really strong, making my eyes water. I'm going to give them a really, really good wash under cold water. I'm going to need two what we call cartouches for this recipe. It's essentially a circle of greaseproof. So one is to bake the pastry blind and one is to cook the leeks under. So we've got 2 squares of greaseproof or parchment, fold in half and then into half again to make a square. And then using the tip, which is all the folds are in, just keep folding over, just like when you're making those Christmas snowflakes. Now over here I'm melting some butter in a pan for the leeks, and I want this cartouche to fit neatly in. So if you measure from the centre and then chop that around in a bit of a curved shape, that should be pretty much the size that will just tuck in. So give it a scrunch. That's going to tuck in really nicely.
Why are we putting that in there?
Because we want the leeks to cook. I'll go and get them a moment. Really, really soft, so that they're almost like a puree. You mush them between your fingers, they go really, really soft. 2 reasons for that. One, you want the sort of leek to more like flavour the tart than actually be lumps of leek. And also leek, and most onions actually, until they're really well cooked, they're acidic, so it will curdle the cream in the tart. In go my leeks. Important to put some salt on now. Salt. When you are cooking, do layer the seasoning up as you go. Now we're going to pop that cartouche in to sort of just create like a little blanket, and then we're going to put the lid on as well. So we're going to create, there was still a bit of water on those leeks, so it's going to create a really lovely, slow, steamy atmosphere. But important, keep remembering to stir them. So I'll show you those at intervals. Chilled pastry case, my larger cartouche, okay, bigger than the size of the tin. Scrunch it up again. Pop that down right into the corners. And then we want a nice layer of these ceramic baking beans, about sort of 1 centimetre layer. But like I said before, dried beans, dried chickpeas, haricots, dried rice, dried pasta. My mum always used to use dried rice actually and put it back in the tin. That will all be absolutely fine. So this is going to go into a 200-degree oven. We're going to cook it initially for 15 minutes with the paper and beans, then lift them out and do another 5 minutes just to dry it out completely. Pastry's had 15 minutes and you can see that it's just golden around the edges. So really carefully, because these beans are boiling, just lift those out. And then we're going to pop that back into the oven just so that all of these slightly undercooked areas get really, really crisp. You don't ideally want
How
to.
long are we going to put it back in?
Only another 5 minutes. Now, if you have a look at my leeks, so real steamy cartouche, and you can see they're getting super, super soft, almost sort of creamy. So I'm going to give those again another 5 or so minutes. Grated all of that lovely Gruyere.
How many grams is that?
Grater, about 100 grams. One of my favourite cheeses, really nutty. Now, just have a look at these leeks, because that's what's important at the minute. Now they're really hot, but if I show you, if you just take a bit between your fingers, it almost, oh that's hot, goes to like a sort of smudgy puree, which is a bit of a messy way of showing you that they need to be really, really soft. So just let those cool a minute.
Is the pastry okay?
We mix together. Actually use this jug. No, I do need a bigger jug. I'll show you why in a minute. We've got 350 of double cream. You could use single cream or a mixture, and creme fraiche would be fine too. I've got some of my sister's posh eggs here. She's got a posh chicken that lays blue eggs. And we're just going to break those in. So 3 good sized eggs. Okay, I want a little bit of salt, not too much, because the Gruyere is really, really salty. And if I was being really, really competent chef, I would put white pepper in, because you don't want the black, the flecks.
Yeah, and apparently you should do that in a white sauce, but who cares?
But I haven't got any white pepper.
It reminds me of school. You know, at school you had those like
white pepper
glass white pepper and salt, and it was like.
Well, I don't have any white pepper.
So
I've got loads in the cookery school. I've got to bring that home. So I've just put a little bit of black. And we're going to put through into this about 2/3 of the cheese, just leaving a third to sprinkle on top. And then I'm just going to let those leeks cool down for a few more minutes before mixing them in too. It's important to, if you put the filling just in the base and pour the egg on, you'll get a sort of just a soggy filling layer. We want the filling to be coated in the creamy egginess. My pastry case is done, probably a little bit more colour than I would have ideally liked there, but the most important thing is that it's really crisp. I'm going to mix all of my leeks carefully into the mixture, every last bit in, and then I'm going to carefully pour this into the tart case. Really important at this stage, remember to turn the oven down to about 140 to 150, depending on how fierce your oven is. So really carefully going to pour this in. You'll see that I've put it on a tray because it's going to be really super full, and it'll help you get it into the oven without spilling it.
It is quite naughty, isn't it? The cream, the cheese.
It is naughty, but oh my goodness, it is so yummy. It's like the best quiche Lorraine plus. It's absolutely one of my fave. But then I'd rather have something like this less frequently and have a really rich one. Now, right up to the top you can see, and then we want to carefully put a sprinkling of this cheese over. Now, what we do not want to happen in the oven is this to cook too quickly, because then it's going to get that sort of hard texture with bubbles through it. We want it just to set very, very gently. So we want a low heat. I mean, my oven's pretty efficient, so although the recipe is 150, I'm going to turn mine almost just under 140. That's gas mark 4. And you're going to need about almost 35-40 minutes, if not 45. But I'd rather it cook slow, and you want that gentle wobble when it's done, and ideally no colour at all. And actually on the colour front, if you remember, my leeks had no colour. I don't want any colour at all, just that lovely goldenness. So into the oven, and let's see what it looks like in about 40 minutes. So here we have finished tart. Now, it's gone a little bit browner. The perfect tart would have no colour at all. My oven's a little bit warm on one side. But what we do want is just, if you can see, you get that little bit slight wobble as it comes out the oven. And set. That will set. And then when it's perfectly cold, take it out of the tin, and you should have that glorious, creamy, cheesy, sort of like fondue in every mouth.